Welcome to episode 202. Tonight on Book Chat, I am interviewing audiobook narrator Erin deWard. Stay tuned and hear all about Erin's adventures in narrating. Today's episode is brought to you by audiobooks.com. New customers get one free audiobook when using our promo code AudioShelf. You just need to enter the code AudioShelf on the sign-up page, then click Apply, then fill out the rest of your account info. Support this podcast by using our code AudioShelf and get your first audiobook free. Hey everyone, I am your host, Tamara Ford, and welcome to Book Chat here on the Shelf Addiction Podcast. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, as always, welcome back. Here on Book Chat, we get bookish with roundtable book discussions, book recommendation lists, interviews, and more. If you'd like to check out book reviews and other bookish posts, please visit the blog at shelfaddiction.com. Erin deWard is an Audie Award-winning audiobook narrator and a classically trained stage actor. She has appeared on the boards in film and television and in voiceovers for everything from nursing homes to political campaigns. Erin is a company actor with the Strange Bedfellows, a New York-based Shakespeare company, although occasionally she can be found running a rehearsal or the lighting board. She also voices, writes, and trains others in audio description for people with low and no vision. Erin is a grateful and proud member of SAG-AFTRA. All of Erin's social media links are below in the show notes, so if you'd like to connect, you know where to find her. If you'd like to comment on something you've heard during today's episode, you can find me on Twitter at Shelf Addiction, or call in and leave an internet voice message via SpeakPipe. If you choose to leave a voicemail, I may reply to your feedback here on the show. The link is below in the show notes. Hi, Erin. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
So happy to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Oh my gosh, we had a fun time getting on this call, you guys. You'll have to ask one of us about it if you're listening. Fun stuff. So let's jump into this. Are you ready, Erin?
I am.
Okay, wonderful. So tell me a little bit about how you got started narrating audiobooks.
Well, let's see if I can do it concisely. That's not my forte. So I've been acting since I was 8 years old, and it's really all I ever wanted to do with my life. I went and studied when I was in elementary school and in high school and in college and after college. And then I had a family and I needed to make money and I needed to have health insurance and things like that. So I took a bunch of different really interesting jobs that were fascinating and got me through my 30s and most of my 40s. But I always was acting on the side. And then I got to be a certain age. I won't say what age that was. And I thought, mm-hmm. I'm never going to be on television.
Oh.
Because I'm a little round middle-aged woman. So I use my acting.
Yeah.
That isn't going to be seen, but will be heard. And I discovered audiobooks.
Okay.
I mean, I had listened to them, but I hadn't really thought of that as an option for acting. And so then I just started stalking people like mad because I was like, I want to learn everything I can learn about audiobooks. And I did. And I met some really interesting people and I got to study with some really great people. And then after all of that, I met my recording partner, Noah, and he had been doing audiobooks for a while at the point when I met him. And he said, you know what, you're a really good actor. You should really be doing this. I'm just going to push you. And he did. He just pushed me and he made me take the leap and I leapt and I've never looked back.
Amazing. Well, that's very cool that audiobooks, were here for you because we need your voice on audiobooks. So
thank you for saying that.
So tell me a little bit about your narration style and voice.
Well, so, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I think that all of us in our lines of work, our various lines of work, we go through these different phases and we go through these different growth plateaus, Yeah. And I feel like I've been doing a lot of soul searching about my work as a narrator recently, because I feel like I've come to a new place. And so I think that when I began, I was really a very, very solid first person, narrator for, the POV, first person POV narrator, because I could really sink myself into, acting the character in that way. And now I'm finding this really interesting thing happening where I'm learning a lot about that narrator voice in third person POV.
Yes.
Right? It's a really interesting character in the work. Because it is a character. And I guess I hadn't really, I knew it intellectually. I knew that the narrator voice was a character, but I just didn't get it in my heart. And now all of a sudden I find myself really enjoying that third person narrator voice, that sort of omniscient, person who's watching the whole thing, maybe pulling the strings a little bit. So I think that I still am sinking myself wholly into it. I really feel like audiobooks have gone from someone who just read the book to someone who kind of told a story to actors being the people who are narrating books.
Yes.
And, you can see that the broad change from when this all began to now. And I feel like I'm finally getting to the point where it's like seamless. I don't know how else to explain it.
So do you think that you're enjoying the third person narrating more than you did the first person narrating?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's they're so different. And I guess as an actor, I didn't really make that differentiation until really recently. And now that I have, it's like a whole new world is opened up to me. It sounds silly, but it's true. It's really very interesting.
I totally understand, because as a reader and listener, from my point of view, I have a preference as well. Like, I do think that it's hard for some authors to nail first person and it not be cheesy, but I love, that omniscient story. You get to hear all sides, you get to hear from all the characters, and that's awesome in an audiobook as well.
Yeah, it really is. And here's the other thing. So I work with a partner in duet narration and sometimes in dual also, but mostly Noah and I do duet. So when I work with him, I'm only doing the female parts. I'm not doing the male parts. And so even in third person, I'm only doing the females. But when I work solo and I do third person and I get to be everybody, including that all-knowing being,
yes,
it's amazing.
It is. I love listening to it. So that's awesome that you love doing it. So tell me a little bit about your favorite project that you've done so far, because you've done a lot of projects. Do you have a favorite?
You know what? I really don't have a favorite. And the reason is, and I was just talking to Noah about this today, the reason is that each project, even if you're doing a series with the same author, each project is so unique. Even if it has the same characters carry over from book to book, the storylines take on a life of their own. And so to be able to pick one over the other, each one comes with its beauty and its challenges and its, it's just its unique voice. And so it's like trying to compare your children or your pets.
Oh, you know what? I always honestly feel like parents can always choose if they wanted to.
You know what, though? I have to tell you, I have two of my own, right? I have a 22-year-old and a 17-year-old. And I prefer one over the other in certain circumstances and the other one over the other one in other circumstances.
Right. And it's situational.
It's situational. I love them both enormously, but I prefer the company of one over the other in certain circumstances and the other one over the other one in other circumstances. And so I really have to say there is no when parents say there's no favorite, they mean it. They're not
Yeah,
lying.
yeah. Okay. I believe you. I have to believe you because I'm not a parent myself. I know that, I'll go with you. You're the authority.
Well, in this, about my own relationship to my own children. Yeah,
Yes,
that's true.
absolutely. So tell me about your studio. Do you have an in-home studio or do you commute to record? What do you do?
Both, actually. So when most of my solo work is done in my home studio, which is on the second floor of my house, and it's a booth within a room. So I'm really sequestered in there. And then, I usually work at home in the morning, and then I usually either walk or ride my bike down to Noah's house to work in his studio, which fits two people, in the afternoons. Sometimes, though, I go into New York City and I record there, but less often than I work at home.
Wow, that's so cool to have like some variation so you don't get kind of bored with one thing.
It is, and I feel really, really blessed because a lot of my narrator colleagues work always by themselves. They're always in a room, in a box by themselves. And, actors, I guess probably people would know this. We thrive on the attention of other people. So being locked in a box by yourself 7 days a week, can be very hard because you don't get any kind of feedback.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why we actually read our reviews ravenously, which is maybe not the best thing because people can be really mean. But that's our feedback. That's the only feedback we get.
Right.
So I'm extremely lucky because I get to work with Noah every day. So I get to see another person. And when I go into the city, I get to see an engineer and hopefully a director. It's really nice to see human faces and to talk to people.
Very cool. So you got to tell me how you ended up in a partnership where, you work with someone consistently on projects. How did you and Noah fall into your partnership?
Because he's relentlessly devoted to furthering my career. Like, honestly, that's the truth. He kept saying, we're going back to 2015 now, and he kept saying, we should record together. We should record together. We should not do dual narration. We should do, you do all the females, I do all the males. And he said it for months and months and months. And I kept saying, yeah. Because I didn't think anybody would want to hear that style of narration because it's so different than what people are used to. And he just kept pushing it. And then we saw on ACX, we saw an audition for Curing Dr. Vincent by Renee Mason. And he said, this is it. This is our book. This, we have to submit this, as a duet. And so, boy, that was loud. Did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
I was like, I don't even know what that was. It was like a tank rolling down the street. So, he said, we have to do this book. We have to submit for this book. And, normally when you submit an audition through ACX, I would say typically you don't hear back right away. Typically, it takes at least a day, if not more. Sometimes it can take weeks. But he insisted that we do this audition, and he insisted that we do it duet style. And I thought this will never fly. And we did it. And Renee got back to us that same night. Like immediately.
Wow.
She was like,
wow,
absolutely. I need you to do my book and I need you to do it duet. And we were so thrilled and I was so terrified and we did it. And it was, and those times in your life when you try something on and it just is the perfect fit and you know it.
Yes. And
we started reading Renee's book and we both were like, oh my God, it's like this was written for us.
It was magic,
It was magic. And he started, before we even finished recording the book, he said, we have to submit this to the Audis. We have to submit this to APA for Audi consideration. I was like, are you kidding me? They're never they're never going to consider this book. Are you out of your mind? And he's like, no. We have to. So he talked to Renee and she was like, yeah, sure. Why not? Why not submit it? So he submitted it. And then like a year later, he calls me. I was driving back. I had been in the city recording and I was driving back. I was on the West Side Highway and he said, you know how you have a lot of nicknames, like your kids have nicknames for you and your husband has nicknames for you? I was like, yeah. He's like, well, I have a new nickname for you. And I said, what? And he said, your new nickname is Audie-nominated narrator.
Oh, wow.
What? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, not only are you nominated, but you won.
We did. So we're at the we're at the Audies, right? And we're sitting there. My very best friend Lisa, who I've been best friends with since I was 3 years old, drove from Ohio to Chicago to be there with me, and we're sitting there and I'm like, there's no way we're going to win, right? We're up against people who have won before, you know, narrators who have been doing this for a lot longer than I have, and authors who are recognized in the genre. And I was like, there's just no way. And then they called our names and I leapt up like a crazy woman and screeched at the top of my lungs. It's so embarrassing.
That's amazing.
It was amazing.
That's awesome.
It was.
So did winning that Audie change your career? Did more opportunities result from that?
You know, I'm going to say no. I don't think that they did. What did change is that I was introduced to a bunch of other narrators who narrate in the romance genre, and it's a very just like the authors are really, really tight and really, really supportive in romance. So are the narrators in a really different way than other narrators are. And I think that experience introduced both Noah and me to this community of romance narrators, and I wouldn't trade them for the world. That was the biggest gift. And they're amazing, amazing people. And that part of it changed my life, and that part of it changed my career.
That's amazing. That's great, because it's always good to know people in a circle, especially like one as distinctive as romance, right? It's kind of like this genre that, writers kind of click together and narrators get together and readers do too. It's like that thing that kind of the glue kind of.
And then we all cross-pollinate also, which is so wonderful. Like, if you're on Facebook and you go to Oral Fixation, that's a great community, and it's narrators and authors and listeners all talking together, all about the same things. It's amazing.
Oral Fixation. Tell me about that, because that name, oh my goodness, what is that community about?
So it's Oral, AURAL, right? And
Oral. Okay,
Oral.
Got it.
Yeah, and it's romance, particularly sort of a more racy romance.
Okay.
Group on Facebook, and it's authors who write sort of racy material, and listeners who love racy material, and narrators who perform racy material. And people are just so funny and so open and hysterical. I mean, the conversations that take place in this Facebook group would make certain people's eyelids turn inside out. You know what I mean?
Okay. So just because you said that, I need to join. Oh, yes, I have to join.
It's amazing. It's a great group of people. So supportive, so kind, so loving, and so funny.
Oh, that's awesome. Because, audiobooks that are not safe for work, they can be a blast to listen to, especially, just grab some headphones. Don't listen at your desk. Don't listen in your car, because everyone can hear, but they're usually really fun.
They are really fun. And they get funnier and funnier, I think, as the genre expands. They really, I mean, not all of them are comic. Obviously, there are some really dark romances out there as well. But I feel like there's a certain amount of humor that goes along with writing very intense sex scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I believe it. So tell me, do you only kind of deal with ACX still, so you can pick and choose what you want to do, or do you do something else outside of that?
Yeah, I mean, I do whatever it takes to work full time. I'm really mercenary. I do audition on ACX. Noah and I, most of our duet work is through ACX because the big publishing houses at this point aren't really keen on duet work.
Okay.
So that's where we get that work from. But I work through some publishers as well. And when I work through publishers, one of two things happens. Either I get an email saying, hey, we have a book for you, and it's this, and it's due this date, and, and then, that's all the information that I get. Or I'll get a notice saying, hey, we have this audition. We think this is a book that you might be good for. Will you get your audition in by XYZ? And I do that. And then either I get chosen or I don't get chosen. So basically I have three different streams, the self-publishing world, and then the publishing world. But, sometimes, for instance, Audible has a tendency to assign you books, and other publishers have a tendency to, I shouldn't say that. That's not really fair. Depending on the author and the publisher, they might ask for an audition.
Okay. Well, now I'm really interested into, the duets thing, because you're right. I don't hear a lot of audiobooks that are in that fashion. But now that you guys are kind of like a package, have you ever come across a situation where they like your voice or his voice, but not together? And they say, well, can you do it with this other narrator, or vice versa?
Well, in dual, yes. He and I both work with other people in dual narration. But the thing about duet is that, and people are working on this, so I don't think this is going to be the case for much longer. But up until now, you really had to be in the same booth in order to do duet, because otherwise the engineer who has to piece together the two different tracks and make them sound like they're one track, that's a lot of work. And it would cost a lot of money to do it. So right now, the people who do duet on a regular basis record in the same studio.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so the difference is like, so dual, for example, maybe that might be more of a book where a chapter is told from the male or female point of view.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's easier for an engineer to do, because then they're just taking chapters, and when they do the mastering process, they're mastering it all together.
Okay, so duet though, line by line, you guys are talking back and forth.
Right.
Oh, wow. So who decides, I guess, when there is a third, when it's third person point of view, and then there's two people talking, that's very interesting to me. So how do you decide, okay, so this part of narration right before this person speaks, is that your narration or his narration? How do you guys sort that out? Does it take a long time to figure it out before you record?
Well, so most books, the majority of books, are very clear, chapter by chapter, whose point of view the chapter is from, or whose section of the chapter, because sometimes there'll be like a little line in the chapter where the point of view switches.
Yeah.
So usually it's pretty easy to figure it out. And we do that in our prep, where we look at and it, if it says something like, she had never felt this way before, clearly that's from her point of view.
Yeah.
So then I do the narration until it switches. There are some books where I feel like the point of view shifts internally in the chapter. Thankfully, he and I haven't come across anything like that when we're doing duet, but I have in my solo work come across that. And you need to just be able to shift. You just need to be able to shift perspective to the perspective of the person who is being reflected in that moment, unless it's a totally removed omniscient narrator, and then your character voice for the narrator is stays the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually think that that kind of narration, the duet narration, can be really good for a few. I've read a couple of books where honestly, even though even from chapter to chapter it changes, but sometimes the characters, believe it or not, aren't different enough for us to tell as a reader without it saying Bob, Sue.
Right.
And that's not good. But in that situation, that is when, the wonders of audiobook. And when you have a male and a female, it's easy. Yeah. There's no question. You know who's talking.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's really, I don't know. I can't say enough about third person right now. I'm on a third person jag right now. Mm-hmm. I love it.
That's awesome. So do you think that you've had any books that you've narrated or even a specific character that has like really given you a lot of grief to try to do? Like, I mean, can you tell me about that experience? You don't have to out the book or anything.
I won't out the book. Yeah. There are times when, so as an actor, you just want to find the actable emotions, right? In any character. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter how well it's written or how poorly it's written. It doesn't matter because there are actable emotions. But there have been a couple of times, particularly when I'm voicing male characters, that I get the devil sits on my shoulder and says, "You don't sound like a man. There's nothing about that sounds like a man." And I wonder if it's me or if the writing, the actable emotions that I can hang my hat on, don't feel male to me. I don't even know what I'm saying, but if they don't feel male,
I know what you're saying. I get it.
And I struggle so hard because you don't want to put on a voice and sound, that's not what it's about. But it's about finding the maleness in the words. And sometimes I just have a really hard time with that. And then the other time that it's really hard is authors. And it's funny because we all do this. It's not just authors. We all have our little catchphrases that we say, right? Just in conversation with each other, there are certain fallback phrases we all have, but authors have them too, little writing tics, and they'll use a phrase over and over and over again. And the first couple of times you're like, yeah, I can make that work. But like the 27,000th time you say something like, I cannot find a way to hang my hat on this. It's just repetition now. And that can be a big struggle.
Oh, totally. I get that because as a reader, and that's the only point of view I have, I have come across books where I'm like, wow, how many times are you going to say that? Oh my goodness. So I can imagine for you, it's pretty hard as well. You're like, I just said that like 20 pages ago. But
and then the worst part of it is because, authors often don't hear their work read aloud. Mm-hmm. When they first hear it read aloud, and there are a lot of repetitions like that, they'll freak out. Because they're like, what did I do? Why did I do that? That's terrible,
Oh no!
And then they feel bad.
Oh no!
And it's not terrible. It's just it's not as good as it could be.
Right. Exactly. That's where a good editor comes in. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes, it is.
Yes. So let's talk about the book that we're going to hear a snippet from in a moment. You provided Rose Hill by Pamela Grandstaff. Yeah. Before we listen to it, can you tell me why you chose this particular snippet?
So again, third person, loving it, right? Mm-hmm. Pamela's books, I'm right in the middle. I'm right enmeshed in Pamela's books right now, Pamela's universe right now. I love this universe so much. So it's set in a small town. The people are quirky and laugh out loud funny, and yet there's serious undercurrents going on, and they're well-developed characters with a lot of personality and a lot of backstory. And I don't know. I just really, I'm loving living in her universe right now. And so when you said, can you send me a clip? I was like, well, of course it's going to be a Pamela clip because that's the universe I'm loving right now.
Yeah.
So that's why. And then I thought, well, I need to find something that'll convey, a little bit about the universe in a short little snippet, because it you asked for a pretty quick clip. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And that's why I chose what I chose, because I figured it was interesting, it was enticing, and it gave a flavor of Pamela's writing.
Okay. All right, everyone, take a listen to this clip from Rose Hill.
Scott and Ed probably went up to the cemetery. I was looking for Drew, Maggie replied. I don't care where Scott is. Oh, well, my mistake, Hannah said, pretending to take offense. Mamie Rodefeffer came in, dragging her tote bags and swinging her cane around. A mountain of food was spread out on the long buffet tables, and Mamie was first in line, where she loudly criticized everything, yet piled her plate high. Mamie wasn't at the funeral, Mrs. Myers told Maggie. She told me Theo was the devil's own son and deserved what he got, but put out some free food and she makes a beeline. Anne-Marie went and got herself in a car wreck, they heard Mamie tell someone. We may be doing this again in a few days if she doesn't come out of her coma. This potato salad has pickle relish in it. Someone has ruined a perfectly good potato salad.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on in this clip. Obviously, it's following a funeral, and there's some interesting things this old woman is saying. So let's talk about it. What's this scene?
Okay. So, without giving too much away, the town bully has died, and nobody's particularly sad that the town bully is dead, because he bullied everyone in town. But the town, because it's small, is a little bit gossipy. If you've ever lived in a small town, you know how that can be. I grew up in a town where people knew what I was going to do before I did it. And my mother often got a phone call if people suspected I might be up to something. And it's kind of the same thing in Rose Hill. And Mamie is she's the granddaughter of the person who founded the Rodefeffer Glass Works, and she thinks of herself as very high class, and everybody else is beneath her, and so she sort of likes to boss people around and show her superiority. And she's elderly, and so people put up with it.
Yeah.
But they talk about her behind her back, because that's what one does, right?
Oh my gosh. So is she like kind of reminiscent of, I can't think of the character's name, but the older grandmother in Downton Abbey, played by
Maggie Smith.
You know who I'm talking about?
Maggie Smith.
Yes, Maggie Smith.
She is a little bit, only she isn't charming in the way that Lord Grantham's mother is.
Yes.
She's funny because she doesn't know she's funny. And and she does rub people the wrong way, although I think most of them take her with a grain of salt. But when she comes in to the funeral reception, as it were, and she sidles up and complains about the food and complains about everything, and then stacks her plate full of food, in front of all the ladies who she belittles, but she's eating their food, and she's, they all take a look. They get their noses out of joint a little bit. About her lack of consideration for the people around her.
Oh wow!
Yeah, the ladies just crack me up because they're all in competition all the time anyway. So it's all about, well, my son, my daughter, my this, my that. And they're all always talking over each other. And
That's funny.
yeah, it's a funny little scene.
It is. And I hope we get to see her throughout the series, because this is a long running kind of cozy mystery series.
10 books.
10 books. Wow. And you've narrated all of them.
Well, I'm in the process of narrating all of them.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I'm going to be living in this world for quite a while, and I'm really glad for it.
Wonderful. So how many are under your belt?
I'm on book 2 right now.
Okay.
And Mamie, as far as I can tell, I have the first 4 books in hand right now, and Mamie's in all of them. So.
Oh, that's fun.
That's a good thing.
So the main character, who is the main character in these books? Is it a heroine and she is solving these mysteries?
Well, it's sort of hard to say who the main characters are. There's a cohort of main people. So there's Scott, who's the police chief, who doesn't believe that he's really cut out to be a police chief. He's sort of a gentle soul who passes out at the sight of blood. Yeah. And he's completely in love with Maggie Fitzpatrick, who's this wild, red-headed fireball of a woman who owns the local bookstore and cafe. And so there's a sweet romance that goes on in these books between Scott and Maggie. Mm-hmm. He loves her. He adores her. He tries to woo her. And when she's in his presence, she's taken with him and sort of starry-eyed about him and loves the way he smells. But then when she's away from him, she's like, no, that can't happen. He's going to expect me to be something I'm not, and I am not going to, because she has a temper and she's wild, and she thinks he's going to want her to be something that she's not, when in fact he's just in love with who she is, and they've known each other their whole lives. So there's that. And then there's Maggie's cousin. Well, actually, Maggie has 2 cousins who are equally involved in the sort of investigation of the murders. But Scott does it through proper channels, and the ladies do it through improper channels. Mm-hmm. Like, they find things out, and they, in typical cozy mystery fashion, they do all the things they're not supposed to do. They break and enter, they hide evidence, they burn evidence to protect people they love. So they're always sort of getting in his way, but sort of helping him out also in ways that he would never be able to do if he went through traditional channels. So they're the core group.
Well, that sounds very interesting to me. I will be definitely checking these books out as you complete them, because I definitely want to hear you narrate more of these characters. It sounds very good.
They're really fun.
Yeah. So is there anything else you're working on right now outside of this series that you would like to share, or is that about what's your whole world right now?
Oh, golly. Okay, sure. So Noah and I are doing a duet by Lily Atlas called Escapades. Mm-hmm. And it's a book that's not like any other romance book I've done up until this point. It's a marriage. It's a romance book with the protagonists being married to one another. And when I first heard that, I thought, that'll be interesting. But in fact, it's very interesting. It's emotionally incredibly intense and beautifully written. And I'm not going to tell you anything else about it because I don't want to mess it up. But it's not what you would normally think about for a romance, and it's beautiful. So there's that. So that's my audiobook world. In my audio description world, I just did one of the most incredible things I've ever had the privilege to do. I worked with a choreographer whose name is Alice Sheppard. She's a dancer and a choreographer, and she has her own dance company. And she is a person who uses a wheelchair, and so her choreography includes her wheelchair.
Okay.
And she made this piece called Descent, and basically they built this incredible ramp thing, and it's her and another woman who uses a wheelchair. It's an hour-long dance piece. And she and I had this conversation about how audio description, which is translating visual images into auditory images for people who are blind or partially sighted, and so that they can participate in culture in a way that sighted people obviously can do without a second thought.
Right.
So she and I had been talking about how in dance, there's not enough time for an audio describer to adequately describe a dance movement in the amount of time that it takes to do the actual movement.
Mm-hmm.
So Alice hired a poet to write audio description for this piece. And so what the poet did was sort of tell the story through emotion and movement references. And then they had me voice the poem, and it became part of the soundscape of the dance piece. So sighted and non-sighted people are hearing the entirety of the poem and the music, so that everyone is experiencing the same thing. And it just premiered in New York City at the end of March 22nd, I think, was opening night. And it was a pretty amazing thing because Alice is doing stuff that nobody else is doing. And I'm really, really proud to have been asked to be a part of it on the ground floor like this, because I think she's going to change a lot about how blind people access dance.
That is just awesome. That is awesome. Literally. Yeah. I've not heard of that before. And it's so game changing.
It is.
That's amazing. Definitely.
It's totally amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I will include a link in the show notes for everyone to check out that. It's playing now, right? It's open right now.
No, it closed.
Okay.
But there is, I believe on YouTube and I believe on Vimeo, there's at least partial footage of parts of it. But people should keep an eye out for Alice Sheppard, and her company is called Kinesthetic Light. And she's amazing, and she's breaking ground in ways that most people don't even think about.
Yeah.
I think she's going to change the world. I really, really do.
Yeah, sounds like it. She is definitely making strides in that arena for sure. Wonderful. Okay, so is there anything else you'd like to share before we sign off for the evening?
I could talk and talk and talk and talk, but I think I'll stop for now.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Erin, for being here. I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed the conversation.
I had a great time. I'm so pleased that you invited me on and that we got it to work, because I wouldn't have wanted to miss this.
No, absolutely. Okay, everyone, be sure to follow Erin on Twitter and check out her website. All of her links are below in the show notes, so you know how to reach her if you'd like. Thanks for streaming and downloading and taking your time to listen with us today, listen to us chat, and I will catch you on the next book chat. Until next time, take care, everyone. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to show your support, there are a few things you can do. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a positive 5-star review. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Most importantly, you can share this podcast with friends and family that love pop culture, from books and audiobooks to TV and movies. I'll see you next time here on the Shelf Addiction Podcast.